So I'm going to share with you kind of 10 thoughts or trends or forces, I guess, that I think are really quite key that you didn't necessarily kind of read in a textbook, but these are just my thoughts. You can totally agree or disagree with them. I look forward to some discussion and debate. But one of them, this is a really interesting statistic. So by 2025, 75% of our workforce is going to be sort of people in this room and a little bit older and a little bit younger. And so what does that look like? And if you think of 2025 and how old you're going to be, you're probably going to be in middle and senior management positions by that time. It's sort of 12, 13 years from now. What does it look like to have an entire generation that has grown up not knowing, not having the internet, and not knowing what it feels like to be connected and to have access to sort of anything information-wise and collaborate and think differently and socially? What does that look like when you guys are running corporations? How is that going to transform this sort of archaic 1950s ways that we still, in many companies, have these silos in how we manage our teams? And so rather than kind of stereotype Gen Y, what I end up thinking when I talk to CEOs, when I talk to sort of different leaders, is starting to understand, instead of, my God, you know, I wish they would just stop texting. No, that how you guys are communicating is your brains are rewiring in a totally different way than people 20, 30 years older than you. So instead of thinking, how do we actually put them into a box that already exists, is the innovative business leaders and the innovative companies are actually thinking of ways of like, God, how do I harness this talent? How do I harness these different ways of working and collaborating? And so that's where I get excited. This is really interesting. So Google has something called an Ngram viewer, which basically measures the number of iterations of a particular word of search that happens in Google. And I want you guys to look over here. So most likely, most of you started high school somewhere kind of around here. The words follow your passion. Basically, look at the trend. When you guys were in high school, for the most part, all of a sudden, this explosion of thought and voices and content and words, this idea of sort of follow your passion and passion first and figure out what you want to do and what you're good at and what impact you want to make, and then go design your life and go design your job. There is no other generation that has ever experienced that. So think about that. Sort of explains a whole bunch of things. It also explains why I know more Gen Y entrepreneurs than anybody else, like more unbelievable people who are leaving school and not finding a job and going, that's okay, I'm going to create my own. And that is a statistic that is growing like you can't even imagine. And in some countries like Greece, where you have 50 or 60% unemployment from college grads, they're either sitting down doing nothing, or they're going, I'm not going to sit down, I'm going to go figure it out. So it's really interesting. One of the second things that keeps me awake at night is the statistic that somewhere between 60 and 71% of the Canadian workforce is totally disengaged about their job. Or totally apathetic, even worse. And so when I think about that, what that looks like, so say you guys walked into a smaller company and say you were a manager and you had 30 staff. If you were best in class out of like all the best companies in Canada or the US, if you thought of your Zappos or your WestJets or whoever you think of when you think of amazing employers, out of your 27 staff, you'd probably have 2 to 3 that really didn't care about their job or were totally disengaged. And if you were the average, not horrible, if you were the average, 21 out of your staff would be disengaged, apathetic, couldn't care less, really showing up with blank stares on their face. Like, what is wrong with that picture? So when I talk about engagement at that level, at the Canadian workforce, 68 to 71% of people not happy in their workplace, I can't even imagine, but I'm going to guess that's like a $200, $300 billion hit to the Canadian bottom line of productivity. Clearly, we need to think about something different. And so I like this visual because this is what I think of. I think of brain cells. I think of a whole whack of people out there walking around with just gray matter in their brain. And then I think of the companies that I know that have got phenomenal employee experiences and have got really activated cultures and really people who understand where they're going and how they can contribute. And that's what I picture their brains to look like. Firing on all cylinders with connections all working together. And really, who would you, if you were leading, so if you were in the HR department and you were recruiting people or you were developing people, who would you rather be talking to your customers? Who do you think is going to walk by and see that there's like an electrical cord hanging out there and maybe prevent an accident from happening? Who do you think is going to be thoughtful and caring and really cooperative with their teammates? How much time in HR are you going to be spending cleaning up drama and sort of people gossiping and talking behind each other's backs and all those other things that happen? How many terminations are you going to be doing, depending on what kind of brains you have? And so in HR, rather than think about your function, I love to think about HR as these agents of culture, and how do we shift the dial in this area? And so this is what I think of when I think of my definition of employee engagement, because to me, employee engagement is this thing that sometimes is a score. It's an employee opinion survey, and you get a number, and you get a score, and in some organizations, your bonus is based on that score and how much you move the dial. This is in HR what your opportunity is. Your opportunity is to create and help the senior leadership team and help every manager in the organization create this culture where there's a heightened emotional connection between people's brain cells and how they feel about the brand that they work with and how they feel about the people that they work with. That is an unbelievable task. It's hard, but it's so rewarding. And so whether you start off in a company that doesn't have that and you're trying to shift things, or right off the bat, you maybe take a different job that wasn't your dream job, but it's in an amazing culture and an amazing organization, start thinking about where the best place for you personally is in 2013 and 2014. And then I want to talk about a little bit about this is sort of the whole internet visually. It's really cool. When the internet was created, which is what, like 20 years ago? 30 maybe? Google is only like 1 year old. When the internet was created, it wasn't created as a means to interconnect entire populations and people around the world. It was made to be two computers talking to each other and transfer information. And so from there, and that purpose of why it was invented to think about our reality today, it's totally wild. So Facebook, for example. So who's on Facebook? So you and 18 other million Canadian users. And 56 of them more likely to buy from a brand that they're connected to. So put on your HR hats and forget about it from a marketing standpoint and think, okay, how do I create community and connection as an employer brand? How do people find me? How do people interact with me? How do I start creating talent communities before people even join me? How do people find me? I love this. Facebook, 52 million fans per Coke. Do you think that some of those fans might be all-star employees? Is the HR department on Facebook, are they integrating and are they having conversations with marketing? Do they have an integrated strategy from their customer-facing brand and their employer brand? Start thinking about those kinds of things. LinkedIn. Who's on LinkedIn here? Awesome. So again, 175 million users, and there's more than 5 million in Canada. This is really interesting because most executives are not on many social media, but almost all of them are on LinkedIn, and 98% of you recruiters use LinkedIn. So again, instead of just having your profile, is your profile optimized? Are you connecting with people? Are you discovering things? Are you Googling, how to find? There's so many different things that you can do from a LinkedIn standpoint rather than just almost have this online resume. So how are you creating your own community, your own tribe using this tool? And YouTube. This one is just mind-blowing to me. And again, I think about it from an HR standpoint and from a branding standpoint and from a learning standpoint. How do we take this platform, and 5 years from now there might be a different platform, but how do we take this idea of sharing video content and actually activating people in different ways? So whether it's attracting talent to you, whether it's sharing knowledge inside the organization, whether it's your CEO, instead of having this quarterly report or shareholder report, maybe they kind of just share something on video and are able to share vocally, here's what the quarterly report is to their employees. How can we use and harness video as a different way of communicating? So all of these different things, what I think about when I think of the role of HR, I think of this concept of how we interact in the world of the internet, how all of us do in our personal lives, how we search for things, how we interact with a Facebook page. We like, we comment, we click, we share, all of those things. How do you think about bringing that same behavior into your organizations? How do you create dynamic collaboration instead of all these silos and departments? How do you create the kind of culture that basically allows employees across departments to participate in projects in real time, to be able to contribute in different ways. So examples of these, just to give you some things to think about, and anybody who's interested, I have lots more different, there's lots of, not case studies, but lots of examples. As an example of that, they don't have job descriptions. So basically they just have a whole series of projects and results that need to happen, and employees pick what they want to be working on and when. So teams expand and contract depending on when a project is starting and stopping. So imagine that. How much heresy is that if you were to go into an organization today and say, job descriptions. How will people know what to work on? They do. And GE Healthcare as well, they actually kind of create a little bit more artificially, but they'll have these conferences every quarter or every annual, on an annual basis, and they'll actually put people from different departments together to solve these really big problems. Like, how do we reduce the healthcare spend, or how do we solve this, or really big issues, and they bring people across all these different departments and they create these work teams around it. That's really cool. Someone is thinking about how to dynamically leverage the information that's inside people's brains, rather than assume that everybody in the marketing department should be thinking about marketing. And then this idea that we're kind of on 24/7, so depending on where you work and what kind of HR department you're leading or working in, is not only potentially are you working globally with people who are in different time zones, but we're attached to this little thing called our mobile phone 24/7. We're plugged in all the time. And so when you're at home, after work and you're checking stuff on YouTube or whatever, and you get an email on your phone, which or maybe on your laptop, are you at work or are you at home? So starting to understand this kind of interconnectedness, all of a sudden you sort of, so you think about this as like, I don't know, maybe 100 years ago, but I am a telephone switchboard operator, and this is my job. So all of a sudden thinking a lot differently. If people are going to be working 24/7 and people are going to be working on different projects, potentially all around the world, potentially not in the same office, then how do I, sitting in the HR department, working with the other senior leaders, how do I start thinking about creating a culture of strategic alignment, where right from the sort of top of the organization, it is so crystal clear what the goals are, what the mission, the values, what the quarterly sort of objectives are, that everybody can then understand how they can contribute to making that happen. And so that, to me, is one of its foundational pieces, is how do you have this relentless focus on results? And sometimes HR is not great about that, because you're sort of staying in the HR metric side of things. To me, the best HR leaders really understand business metrics, and they understand strategically where the organization is going, and then they're basically helping to make that happen. Two really amazing companies right here in Vancouver, if you want to look into a little bit more as far as just strategic alignment and goal setting and really rigorous kind of structure around discipline around this operational excellence idea, is Nurse Next Door and Build Direct. I've spent time in both of these organizations, and every morning everybody stops what they're doing. They spend 7 minutes together. They put a timer on, and they talk about what's your one thing that you're working on today. And then they talk about their one kind of key metric that they're focusing on. And every quarter they have a strategic planning meeting, and they throw away everything else that doesn't make sense, and they know what they're doing for the next quarter. So everybody, it doesn't matter if they're answering the phone or running the company, everybody knows what they need to contribute to reach to the goal. This whole idea of digital literacy seems really obvious, but this whole world, if you look at your apps on your phone, of kind of personal and private, but this whole new language of communicating in a digital world. I was just talking to Quentin about it earlier, and he said, God, I've learned so many new things in the past year and a half. But all of a sudden, taking that into the organization, you think sort of maybe 15 years ago, people had to learn to use email, or had to use a cell phone, versus the phone that was plugged into the wall. But today, only 16% of CEOs actually use social media and communicate either internally or externally with social tools. And within 5 years, that's going to be 58%. So from an HR standpoint, when you're in an organization, how do you yourself, just because you know how to be on Facebook or you know how to interact with your friends, how are you starting to think about interacting with a business audience and for business purposes, internally and externally, with social tools? So here's an example, again, thinking about it with your HR hats on, is you've got TD Bank, and Best Buy does this with their 12th Force as well, where I can tweet sort of a question, or I can interact with customer service agents who basically are lined up right here. And I just sent TD a tweet today saying that I would be talking about them, and I got a tweet back from, I think it was Lauren. And I know it's Lauren because there's a little, at the end of the tweet, there's this little signature right there. To trust that your employees are going to be talking directly to your customers, they didn't just walk in and just start tweeting to customers. How do you create this culture of digital literacy? How do you solve problems? How do you deal with haters? How do you bring people in? How do you sell online? Those are all skills that we need to think about. And so I like to think of this in terms of digital IQ. How do you create the kind of culture where across all departments and in all positions, people can research, they can interact, they can engage internal and external stakeholders using all sorts, not just Facebook, but just social and mobile, and how do we actually conduct business inside the internet? And also, how do you assure, from a training standpoint and a culture standpoint, that people are following common business principles? And people are adhering to whatever it is that your parameters are. And people, your employees in your company, because I guarantee you 5 years from now it's going to be different platforms and technology. But once you're comfortable in a digital environment, it's relatively easy to move to a different platform. And so how do you create the kind of culture where people can move easily as adaptations happen, because goodness knows what's going to happen in the next little bit. So 2 examples, Vail Resorts and Best Buy, are 2 examples of companies that have basically actually taken money out of their marketing department and really done a ton of training with their staff so that their staff are actually ambassadors for the brand directly to the customer. So on the back end, what's going on? How do you organize yourself internally as a culture for that to be able to happen seamlessly? And then I think about leadership and this definition of leader that's shifting. This concept of individual leadership, an individual contributor. It doesn't matter what size organization that you're working. How do you create this culture where every single person in their own way is actually demonstrating the qualities that's going to represent the brand well, that's going to hold themselves accountable to what it is that they want to make sure happens, and how to have positive impact around them. So that concept is really interesting when you look at organizations like Nordstrom or ING Direct. So at Nordstrom, their employee manual, it's like 1 line, 2 lines. The first line is, in their policy manual, is take care of the customer. And their second line is, there are no other policies. And you've all heard customer service stories about Nordstrom, but to create that kind of culture, then you need to know that if you're talking to the woman who's selling purses or the guy or the CEO of the company, if something's wrong, that person can take care of you. And with ING, it's a really small team across Canada. And yet from Peter Aceto, the CEO, to sort of the people who are working kind of virtually online, all of a sudden you have this world of people that are really showing up that I don't need to talk to the person's supervisor or their manager or all the rest, because I feel like when I'm talking to that customer service agent, they really own the problem, they own making it better for me, and they have the ability to be able to make an impact. I don't know if you guys know this, you probably do, but with icebergs, you typically only see 1/8 of the iceberg. So 7/8 of the iceberg is actually under the ground, or under the water. And so when I think about that in terms of culture and what that looks like when you're trying to create something in a really impactful workplace, I think about almost this visibility. Have you guys ever seen Wizard of Oz? So it's like that moment where she kind of discovers that the Wizard of Oz is actually this little man behind the curtain kind of thing. Is we all have this desire to kind of, for the backstage pass, to really see what's going on, to have a little bit more kind of visibility into what's happening. And we like it when we get to see a little bit into the human side of our leaders and the people and the brands that we work with. I love this tweet from President Obama, and this was during the election campaign, and it's like, this seat's taken. And it's, it's not arrogant, but it's fun. And you feel, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like when I watch the inauguration speech, I feel like when I see President Obama speak, or when I see him in an interview, he has a manner about him that makes me feel like I get to know him a little bit more than other politicians that have this wall up. And you just see the public figure. And you think about people like Richard Branson or Gary Vaynerchuk or other business leaders that you know that you kind of just feel like if you saw them in the bar that they would just be the same person. This is really interesting. So we live in a generation where, I don't know if you guys remember when President Obama spent, I think it was 45 minutes, he was on Reddit, and there was like gazillion, 5 or 8 million views in that sort of period of time. He's also done Google Hangouts. We live in a world where anybody, if they happen to log on at the right time, could have actually asked the President of the United States a question or could have made a comment. So what do you think about when Gen Y comes into the workplace and does sort of understands this world? Do you think that there is maybe less of barriers or perceived barriers into when they have something to say? Well, why can't I tell the CEO? Why can't I, what do you mean they all kind of come in and sort of hang out in their own area or do their own things? Like, I have ideas, we live in a world where all those layers can disappear, sometimes do, and therefore how we want to interact with our senior leadership in our organization changes. And so I think about this idea of authentic humanity. And you guys can, by the way, I'll have my slides after. I'll send Steve and I'll try to let a link. Employees have a connection with and an understanding of your brand's values. So first of all, you'd be totally amazed how many brands don't even have values or mission or really a sense of what they stand for. But assuming they do, that people really understand that. People bring their best selves to work, and the work that they do is only a very small component because they understand that the purpose why the company exists is bigger than the work that they're doing. And so you have companies, again, locally, like Great Low Box Company or Harbor Sea Airplanes. You know, when I go to fly Harbor Seaplanes all the time, and I go and I check in, and the person is sort of the person just checking me in, and really it's just a job, but every single time I feel like I have a connection to something a little bit bigger. And that person is passionate about what they do, they're interested, they're interesting, and they're authentic. They're not robots. And then this concept of innovation. And most of you are sort of, think of hacking in a certain way, but hacking in terms of really the true curiosity and doing things with your hand and finding out how things work and challenging things and trying it again. I think Dyson, when Dyson came out, we have a Dyson vacuum cleaner. I think that when they came out with their main model that they have, it was after 5,100 prototypes that were wrong. And then they got it right. Can you imagine being the CEO of one of your board of directors and saying, okay, I know we've had 5,000 misses, but I just need another couple million to make this work because I think I got it this time. 5,100, over 5,100 misses. How do you create this culture in your organizations where people can hack? And I don't mean hack into their computers, but where they can hack around ideas, where they can come up with different solutions. And some companies do it externally with their customers, like my Starbucks idea, for example. They crowdsource. So they you have an idea, what can you do? You know those little plastic things that go into the Starbucks hole, so your drink doesn't, that came from a customer. And Best Buy has the same thing. They have this whole forum where customers can come in, they go, what do you want to see? What's working? What's not? What should we be doing next? And I think it was Best Buy, actually. I think it was, I just read it today. So they were posting a position for, I think it was a social media communications manager of some sort, and they got a little bit of heat because in the job description they said things like, must have a Twitter account with at least 250 followers, and must have a graduate degree. And they got tons of heat from the public around why those two things. So what did they do? The CEO turned around and said, I think it was in this forum, and basically said, so, okay, we've gotten a little bit of heat of this. What do you think this job description should look like? And crowdsourced the job description for this. How brilliant is that? Yeah. Do you think that maybe he got a little bit of brand buzz with that too? Do you think that maybe someone, as they were typing the job description, kind of went, hey, I could do this? So I didn't actually see the stats of how many people contributed, but pretty cool. So how do we create in our organizations, whether you're working in a very small entrepreneurial organization or whether you're working in a big, big organization with lots of layers in it, in your own little way, what can you bring over the course of the next decade in your workplace? And I say that because it's not something you can do walk in and go, hey guys, we're going to just start having hackathons and kind of got to at least get through a 3-month period, waiting period. But over the course of the next decade, are you guys going to be the kinds of leaders who basically create the space for learning and innovation to happen? Last year in a CEO survey of, I think, 1,700 CEOs, that was the #1 competency that they were looking for in terms of missing in their organizations. Innovation. I think this year it's #3, but it's still right up there. And so in your organization, what does relentless innovation look like? How are you continually empowering your employees to basically improve that operational excellence and customer loyalty? And this is another key thing too that you'll find when you go in organizations. You can also have a bunch of ideas, and then people get really attached to them, and they go and they go and they go, and they're clearly not working. An initiative has happened, it's been rolled out, but so much effort has happened, and people don't let go of it. And all the employees know that it's not something that's going to work, and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Really great innovative cultures have a ton of ideas, and they also have a system for culling all the ideas that don't work really quickly and without getting emotionally involved. So companies like Gmail, Google and 3M, they actually allocate like 20% of the employees' week can be spent on coming up with cool ideas to improve the business. And then they pick from some of those and they crowdsource them and they rank them. And so even in HR, we're seeing some really cool companies actually coming out of even Vancouver and Canada, things like Payroll Hero, where all of a sudden time and attendance and doing your payroll could take 8 or 16 hours a week, but all of a sudden people can clock in and clock out with their mobile phone. And not only that, but it snaps a picture of you, and you can actually, over time, overlay these pictures, and the system actually senses your happiness level. Over time. Like all these images. So obviously today you're not very happy, but maybe not. Maybe that's a picture. But this is Steve, this is the founder. But imagine over time if you could have this data, and now all of a sudden you don't need your employee engagement surveys in the same way, but you can start looking at Steve who's like, happy, 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 and all of a sudden for like 2 weeks his stats are going down. Would you maybe go to Steve and say, hey Steve, what's going on? Maybe we go for coffee, have a one-on-one. So these are the kinds of really cool innovations that are happening in the HR world. This whole idea of transparency is a really, really big trend, and it's something that scares a lot of HR leaders, it scares a lot of business leaders, because this idea of being open and transparent has implications. But when I think about the workplace, and I think of all these things that go back and forth, and this person's blind copied on this email, and this person's CC'd, and this person has access to this file, and this drive, and all the nonsense stuff that takes so much time for people just to find information and get work done, all of a sudden to move to this more open, transparent place where information is flowing more frictionlessly and people can access the information that they need, when they need it, how they need it, and it's not necessarily information that's fed for them. Just like we are on the internet, people will find it. So TELUS and IBM are brilliant at this from a corporate culture. If you ever want to study, actually Dan Pontefract, who's the director of, one of the directors of learning for TELUS, he's actually just come out with a book called Flat Army that comes out in March. So if you're interested in a good read, Dan's a friend of mine, and it really talks about that open learning environment that they have at TELUS. And IBM, Chuck Hamilton's been a speaker at a conference that I run a couple of years, and IBM, like, you have 45,000 people working remotely all over the world that don't even have an office. Maybe it's 450,000. It's a lot of thousands of people. And so they have, how they basically help people access information is wild. And the last one is trust. And thinking of trust, we already know this because of social graph and because of interacting and because of reputation. And when you go on TripAdvisor and you basically look to go on vacation and you know that people that you know recommended it, we know that trust and reputation is important. It's probably the most foundational piece when you're going into a future workplace that I think. And this whole idea that your social reputation and your in-person reputation, not just social media, but as you create these kind of internal social environments, what you contribute, how you conduct yourself, makes people trust you more or less. And in the Olympics, I mean, you guys saw it last summer, this was the Olympics, and more than ever, all the athletes were kind of out there representing their brands because they were representing their sponsors, representing their countries, and basically all of a sudden it's really interesting to start seeing what kind of things were kind of going on. And this guy who got expelled from the Olympics because he took that dummy photo of him in the gun shop, and it was just something fun, but what is the role of trust in terms of his sponsors sort of or his team sort of trusting that when he's out, he's going to be able to speak for the brand and understand the brand. So this whole idea of people that are in trustworthy and trusted workplace cultures are people who work in a culture that they feel like the workplace has total trust in them and that they have total trust in the workplace. Zappos is a really great example. I'll give you that one example. So with Zappos, when you think from the HR department, they have an employee orientation kind of policy and procedure book. Guess who writes it? The employees. So every year it gets edited, the employees edit it, and not a word gets changed. That's pretty cool. So all of these things, these 8 principles, these are some of the ways that I think we can start in HR making a difference and creating a little bit more impactful workplace. So how do you stand out in this crowded market? How do you come out of school and stand out? So this last piece is just for me, again, just after 18 years, if I was sitting in this chair, what, maybe some people said to me 18 years ago, or just some things that I wanted to share with you. The first is focus. You guys are good at a lot of different things. You guys have learned a ton of different stuff over the past couple of years. Is start thinking about, what do I want? What industry do I want? What area do I want? Who do I want to work with? Do I want to work in a smaller business, a bigger business? And really get clear from a focus standpoint and start taking tiny little baby steps to make those things happen. This is one that's really interesting because when I talk to a lot of senior executives and people in management roles, it's one of the stereotypes that I hate, that I hear all the time about Gen Y, is they're arrogant and they're entitled and there's this big sense of, give me this and I want it now and I'm impatient. And it's not true, it's just that you've sort of grown up in this generation where you really don't have a whole bunch of barriers and you really have been told you can do anything because you can. But humility goes a long way. And so on this end there's sort of arrogance. And on this side, there's like invisible. I can't even see you. I don't even know your accomplishment. So somewhere in the middle, there's this place where you can be confident, but still be humble. So as you're looking for jobs, talking about your accomplishments, when you're in a job, when you're working with a team, thinking about that balance between confidence and humility. Lauren's going to talk a little bit more about hustle. So all I'll say with that is, make no mistake, the next 10 years of your life, you guys are going to work hard. But hopefully you're going to work hard in a place that you want to work hard. And it's not just going to come to you. And you might have 100 resumes out, and you might get 5 interviews, and you might get no job offers. And you go and you try another 100, or you try a different way. So you kind of have to hustle and make things happen. This is a big one for me, enjoy the journey. And it's something I've really tried to do over the course of the last 18 years and continue to do so. But as you sort of hit the next phase of your life, even though you are going to hustle and you're going to work hard and all of this stuff, is take time for yourselves. Trust me, I have 2 little kids. It's once you sort of have kids, it changes. So a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, I wouldn't change it for the world, but it's different. And I did. I lived in Whistler for 12 years in my 20s, and I did a ton of stuff, and I skied, and I hiked, and I did the things that I really needed to, and I was working in a retail store that I really liked and an environment that I liked. And I was challenging myself in that role, but enjoy the journey. Do what you say. This is a really interesting one, and it's something that applies to everybody, not just you guys. But it's probably one of my most, things that I notice the most corporately and even personally, that very often people will say something and do something different. If you want to stand out as a friend, as a partner, as an employee, if you say you're going to do something, make it happen and do it. And if you can't do it, that's okay, but let people know why, and let people know what you can do instead. Notice the details, and this is really, really something that I think I've tried to do over the past probably 18 to 20 years, and something that is really something that will serve you well in life. So whether you're connecting with someone on LinkedIn for the first time, instead of saying, oh, this is a really great connection, woohoo, like, we're in the same group together, BCHRNA, can we connect? Go spend the extra 2 minutes on their profile and notice something. I guarantee you somewhere in their profile there's going to be something that you can then strike up a conversation. Oh, I noticed that you da-da-da, and you had worked at such and such a place. My uncle works there. Like, find the tiny little things that make people feel like you really saw them. Remember that movie Avatar, I See You? We talked about I See You. See the person first, not the job opportunity, not the connection, not the networking, that side of things. See the person first. In your organizations, when you're in an HR department, when you're thinking about the business, look at the details. Look at the P&L statement and look at that one little number that no one else is seeing. You know what? Like, that looks odd to me. Why is that? And then dig in. It might be like a $20,000 savings that you've done. So get really good at noticing the details because most people are so overwhelmed with the quantity that they just skim. Be interested and be interesting. You know, it's something that I talk about. So not only just you have got a bunch of stuff that's really cool, but be interested. Be interested in the things that are around you. And this is a big one. Be brave. And I'm going to say, especially for the women in the room, this is actually even more important. So as I kind of climb the corporate ladder, whatever you want to say in corporate life, especially as women, often we don't take enough risks. Or you're new in a position, and so you don't want to speak up because the consequences would be, oh, I might lose my job, or this person might not like me, or like we just go to a whole bunch of places in our head. There's a lot of times in the next decade that you guys are going to have to make decisions that require a little bit of, like in here, it's going to feel yucky. And it's going to feel like there's some weird energy going on. And there's going to be risk, but the opportunity might be really big. Or the opportunity cost, if you didn't take that little step, might be really big. So be brave. Find your uniqueness. Every single one of you, I know it, every single one of you has something that is so unique about you. So honor your story, honor your experience. It does, like, it could be something random that you have, you know, 5 siblings, or you can, play the flute with your nose, or like whatever it is, right? Like you guys all have something. Don't just be another business card that's the same, or dressed in the same suit, or the same resume. Think about the things in your story and your experience, because all of your experiences, and even the stuff that's really awful that you don't even think is part of your experience, is making you who you are today. So embrace your uniqueness and try and spend some time thinking about who you are today. And don't be invisible. So for those of you guys who are maybe not sort of really present on social media, for those of you guys who go into a classroom or into an organization and your natural style is to sit back and be watchers or observers, that's awesome. But at a certain point, if you want to lead and if you want to have impact, you cannot be invisible. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the loudmouth in the room. There's one in every room. You don't have to play that role necessarily. But trust that sometimes you need to step up, and sometimes it's okay to say, hey, look what I did, or hey, I'd like to take on that. Don't be invisible, because you know what? People are just going to pass you by, and you're going to be 20 years later working in the same type of role. And at the end of it all, I don't know if you guys have ever read anything to do with the law of attraction, but it's really cool. There's some great stuff with it. But this whole idea that our thoughts become our words, and our words become our actions. And it is, I'm just going to give you an example that is like almost coincidental, that I don't even know if it's possible. But so over the past 3 years, I've been building my business, and you're a solopreneur. So you're doing everything, marketing and business development and everything. You're accounting, I hate accounting, and you're doing all of your stuff, right? And I have 2 kids, and I have a life, I have all these things, and I just got to this place going, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I just I work all day, I pick up my kids, we kind of hang out together, my family's super important to me, my kids go to bed, and what do? I work for another 3-4 hours. And I'm building this business, and I'm doing all of this stuff that matters, but I'm like, holy smokes. So I kind of made this little mental resolution at Christmas, and I went, you know what, I'm going to work 25 hours a week. 9:30 to 2:30, do what I can. I know stuff's going to fall off the plate. I know it. And stuff has. But that's what I'm going to do. I am not kidding you. My phone has rang more times in the past 2 weeks. People going, so I'm just wondering if you're, available in April for this, or I'm just wondering if, you're free. All of a sudden, and it's almost scary to say, but literally the minute that I stopped trying to do it all and just sat back, all of a sudden stuff started happening differently. So read a little bit more about the law of attraction, because as you go out into the job search and the job world, and as you want to make things happen, you get frustrated at work because you're working with this department or something's happening from work, think about it. And so I just wanted to kind of finish off with just a couple of examples that for me, really kind of stand out. This I just found today, which I just think is brilliant if you haven't seen it. It's Guy's Room. So filled out is the website. So this guy, this dude, this is his resume. And I don't know how, but he basically rebuilt the Amazon site to make it his resume. Look it up online. You actually can scroll through. Look at this, filled up. This is what he is. So it's like you're purchasing him. Only one left in stock, order soon. And then here it says frequently bought together, so it has all these other things. And then it has this item is he's a web product manager. And then these are things that he liked. Then there's product dimensions, so his height. Shipping says this item is available for shipping anywhere in the world. Like, totally creative and brilliant. And tell me that this guy doesn't have like 20 job offers. I love it. Add to wish list, add to wedding register, and then just link to them. And then I wanted to give two other examples kind of closer to home. And I don't know if you know both of these guys or one or the other, but both of these are guys that I met 2 years ago, sort of at various BCIT conferences. And I just wanted to give you a sort of little bit closer to home example of for me, and I'm connected to a ton of sort of grads and recent grads and all the rest, but for me, Gordon and Steve stand out because not only are they a little bit more active, but they also have this style that is really true to who they are. And when I first met Gordon, Gordon doesn't even know I'm doing this, so if you guys want to tweet him, I think he's G-Don, and I think, yeah, he's G-Don, you can tweet him, tell him I'm talking about him in a presentation. But what is really interesting is when I first met Gordon 2 years ago, he was working at Aldo in a shoe store, and he's in human geography, I think is what he's doing. And over the past 2 years, I've seen him really flourish in kind of these leadership roles that he's doing at these international student conferences. He's starting to go to a lot of entrepreneur and kind of startup sort of conferences. He's starting to get connected to some really cool people. He's getting some mentors. And he's doing this in this way that is not arrogant, it's not in your face, it's just, for me, really authentic. So even though I don't talk to him on a daily basis, I enjoy sort of seeing those updates. And I know that somewhere down the line, he is going to create his own opportunity that's going to be in a different place than just handing over a resume without having all of this data. Because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to your social profiles. I'm going to go to your LinkedIn, or if you have a blog. And I'm going to feel like I have a little bit greater sense of that authenticness of yourself when I do see this consistent brand. And Steve, you crack me up, because Steve has this very professional sort of side, and he's got all of this great stuff that he's done with school and HR. But for those of you who are connected to Steve, is you also have this really slightly sarcastic, kind of funny humor about you. And so when you go out there in the world, like, don't lose that, because that's what makes you stand out. And the guy that I meet and the guy that I see online feel exactly the same. And that's a really great thing. So when you sort of who you are yourself, when you're being your best self, and how you show up to an employer should be really similar. And so we're all kind of just finish off, and I'm going to finish off. I started with the video, I'm going to finish with the video. But I really believe this, that sometimes the best road is the one that you make. And you guys are all on your own journey. You've all had a journey to get here already to this day. There's going to be lots of roller coasters. But you know what? You guys are totally masters of your destiny. And use each other in the community that you've created here once you step out of school. Because you know what? It's an amazing journey, but you have to actually enjoy the journey itself. So that's, and I know you've heard that probably from your parents, your grandparents, and I feel old saying it, but it really is. So at 40, when I look back on that 22-year-old, and I think about my journey to date, I never in a million years could have pictured, I didn't know what I wanted to be. You guys have it way more dialed. You're like, I'd like to be in HR. I had no idea. I went into HR with all these other twists and turns. But that journey itself is really important. So lift up your hand if you've heard of Danielle Laporte. Okay, especially the women in the room. If you haven't checked her out, you've got to check her out. DanielleLaporte.com. Specific book that I love called Firestarter Sessions, or Firestarter. And she's more of a kind of personal branding, kind of thought leader or guru. But I love her message because it's really around connecting with your authentic self and really figuring out what ignites you and how to actually contribute that to the world. So Anka, can you help me with that last video? And her audience is primarily women. You just put up this slide. exercise that you're going into. I have also brought 3 copies of one of my favorite books, which I'm going to look at the Twitter feed, and I'm going to pick 3 people that I think should get this book that did a great job on Twitter as we were talking to, or for the rest of the evening. This is a book called Work Sucks, and there's 2 ladies who wrote this book, Jodie Thompson and Callie Ressler. They used to be vice presidents of HR with Best Buy, and they basically started this movement called ROWE, Results Only Work Environment. And it's this whole idea, it's not flex time, it's not working virtually, it's actually getting to a place in a culture where people are so clear on the results that you give them complete autonomy to get the job done. So here's what you need to do, I don't care how you do it or when you do it or where. And it's really, really interesting to read. So I've got 3 copies of that. And I also have, for those of you guys who are interested, a couple of years ago I created, it's just a little infographic, but for some of you it might be interesting. It's kind of a little infographic that sort of talks about the 5 phases of the employee life cycle, the way that I see it, and gives some examples of some social tools and some different ways of thinking about it to sort of narrow down just some different ideas to think about. So I'm happy to share what I have with those with you guys, happy to share offline and on, and I am so, so excited to see what the next 5 to 10 years in BC looks like with a bunch of amazing leaders like you at its helm. So thanks for your time, guys.